Well, our next guest on today's Big Blend Radio Nature Connection show, airing live from Porterville in the heart of California Sequoia country, we have Jim Ostdick, our friend Jim Ostdick, joining us. He is the author of Palomino and the Dream Machine, a retired dude's bicycle tour around the lower 48 United States. He's also the author of Palomino Nation, my 2016 crazy-ass walk across America. And today he's joining us with his next big adventure. Now, this is an interesting story. His book is called Walks Far Man, In Step with History on the Pacific-Crest-Trail. All of his books are available on Amazon. You can also follow his blog. It is palominodream.blogspot.com. So happy to have you back on the show. Jim, how are you?
Hello, Lisa. I'm doing great. And hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Nancy back there in the background. Yes, hi.
She's there. She's there.
I'm here.
She's behaving. Not really.
Okay, that's good.
So, Jim,
I think I need to shorten the next title of my next book. It needs to be something like 2 or 3 words. You have to say so many words when you read my book titles.
Well, you walked far and you cycled far, so it's okay. It's okay. I like your book titles, but Walks Far Man. How's that book title? Where did that come from?
Well, when I got back from my coast to coast walk across the country, my friend Elaine Reyna here in town, she just lives at the end of the block. She's Native American, and so is her husband, Sonny Reyna. And they christened me Walks Far Man when I came home. And it's kind of neat to have to use the old terminology, an Indian name, given to you by some elders, and I appreciated it. So I hang on to that. No one else calls me that really, but I respect them and I appreciate what they did. So I use that as title of my name. The title of this book, which is kind of appropriate considering it was a really long walk.
It was a long walk. But so the Pacific-Crest-Trail, which is, a lot of people write about their journeys of walking the Pacific-Crest-Trail, whether they do a through hike or whether they do like a bunch of little hikes or they do the whole thing all the way through, right? And it's an interesting trail, so many different terrains. And reading your book, I'm not all done yet. I'm taking this, bit by bit, because it's a journey. You've got an adventure. There's always something really funny. There's always something that, when you get into litter and things, it gets me angry. But there's all kinds of things that you stumble on your adventures, which we love. But what I really love is you bring in the nature, what it's like to hike it, the different terrains and topography is just so. When you think about it, from basically Mexico to Canada, you're walking, and through the Sierra Nevada, it's everywhere. You bring in the culture, and I think that is so crucial that we understand the cultures of where we're walking, where ancestors have been, because I think the history, Native American history, has been so left behind.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important.
Well, it's a long trail. It's a wonderful, beautiful experience to hike the whole thing, and there's no doubt about it. If you can make the trail from Mexico to Canada or from Canada to Mexico in one hiking season, from spring to the first snow, it's an incredible accomplishment. And I have to. I applaud anybody who has done that or wants to do it, really. And that's what my intention was at first, was to do it all in 1 year. But some family issues I'd rather not explain got in the way, and so it turned me into a section hiker. But the old saying goes, is we're all section hikers until we reach Canada. So it turned into a long experience, but it also turned into a great learning experience studying the things that you're talking about, about the different terrain and the maybe how it all came to be. And then as I was, kind of putting together my story, I started in 2001, finished in 2009. As I was putting together my little stories, I started to think of, and I was influenced by Elaine and Sonny Rena for sure, by my getting to know them. But I began to think, well, how did these trails get to be, and the more reading I did, you look in the back of the book, there's 9 pages of references. I did a lot of homework. And it turns out that a great portion of the trail consists of pieces of old trade routes, indigenous trade routes, that have been there for, thousands of years. And so the great accomplishment of putting, of creating this national scenic trail was stitching all of these little pieces together and creating some new ones to connect them to make a 2,650 some mile trail from the southern border to the northern border of the United States. It's quite an accomplishment. And my goal was to, learn and identify the indigenous tribal bands that whose lands the trail crosses. And there were more than 30 individual groups that I was able to, find out about. And so it was quite a learning experience.
That's incredible to dig into the history, and then, I'd be nervous to write about someone else's. I'd be like, is this correct? Because, who wrote this? Are they right? So there's that part of it, but I think there's also because Native American history is also so much. It's so oral. It's been handed down as through storytelling. So was it hard to get all the actual facts to put it in the book?
Oh, you have to admit, if you're going to do something like this, that what you're doing is contributing to a conversation about what the truth is. You dig and you talk to people, and you dig. I mean, you do research. You read and read and read and read, and you come to the understanding that history is written word by people, mostly white people, who had some bias in their in those years, in the 1800s, 1900s, and they were doing their work. And it's evolved, gradually it's evolved, where some of those oral traditions have come to light. The people who are still alive, they're part of those bands. There are people who are still connected to that, genetically, and in their spirit and soul, and they are, they need recognition, and they're coming forward with a lot of their stories. So these things are coming through. I don't claim to be an expert. I know I made some mistakes. I'm sure I made some mistakes, but if I did make mistakes, they were honest ones that I got from the existing literature.
And that's good to have the references in the back. And I mean, because nothing ever stays the same, even in nature, right? It's like, hummingbirds come from South America one day, the next day we find out, the oldest, what is it? Research shows that hummingbirds came from Germany now.
Europe.
So it's like,
Yeah.
and tomorrow will be something different. Who knows? So it does change.
Yeah.
But it's. I think what
Lisa,
your book does is.
on that point.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say you bring
on that
respect.
point. I just was going to say that the just since I started writing this book, during the pandemic, there have been people coming out of from the tribes that are adjacent to now they're on reservations adjacent to the Sierra Nevada, who are telling their stories about how the what we call the John Muir Trail, it's part of the Pacific-Crest-Trail. 200 miles of the Pacific-Crest-Trail is John Muir Trail. That was an old trade route, and that they have a name for it, and it's in their language. And now it's part of the literature because they've come out and written articles about it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is really kind of neat. I just stumbled onto this while I was doing my research, and so I expect that in the near future that more information will come out that's shines a cool light on all of these things.
I love it. I love it because it's respect. There's a respect to remind us when you're doing the trail. It's not like, I think there's this thing about, okay, let's do this. It's going to be epic. Like, let's do this all by this date. It's like us thinking, oh, we're going to do a 5-year tour. Well, that didn't happen. It just is an ongoing process. It's like Sarah Dykman was just on before you, cycling with the monarch migration. She's like, I'm keeping my itinerary loose so that she can do things. And, so you can make changes. And I think that's part of what's beautiful about your book is like, oh, you're going to go through and then something changed, and you have to go, okay, I'm going to, break it up. But I think sometimes we see more, we experience more. And when you're hiking that kind of distance, when you're taking each step, I always think about what animal was the last there. You can tell by the freshness of their poo, I suppose, but there's always like, who was here? I know, right? It's like, who was here? And there is a feeling when you're walking in places. Some places just really feel ancient, like you can feel ancient, and I'm not getting woo-woo or weird, but I am. You can feel like people lived here. There's an energy that lingers of people living in places. When you're walking, there's a respect, and I think that's what your book really brings about, is for us to think about who lived here where you walked, and what were their cultures, what were their stories, their beliefs. And that's why I'm really glad we're going to do this series, because some of those stories, and we're not going to give the book away, right? You guys have to go get it on Amazon. Do it now. But the stories and the folklore, and you look up at the stars. I mean, all of those stories to me are so beautiful, and some of them are scary.
Yeah.
Especially in Palm Springs area when you go up through Idlewild. Like, how do you pronounce it? Taquit? I always get that wrong. You get to say it.
My understanding is that it's pronounced Taquish.
Taquish.
But I could be wrong.
Ah.
That I read that in a book that was written by someone who did interviews with the original Kauai people that named it that, but I hope that's right. Taquish.
Taquish.
The idea of sacred places is so important to all of those traditions that you read about, and talk to people about, and there are sacred places that establish your action, to if you want to call it nature or whatever, we aren't separate. In our modern world, it's easy to just feel like we're separate, and certainly in the last couple of 100 years, the development of our nation has been sort of separate from nature. Conquer nature, be dominant. Where that's not the that's like a totally different tradition than the indigenous people everywhere practice, and so it's a learning experience, and when people decide to hike a trail like the Pacific-Crest-Trail, if you go in a big group, you have a buffer between you and that experience, in my opinion, and so I did as much of it as I could solo, and sometimes it was a little frightening, in places where it was overwhelming, that you could feel something there that was. I don't want to get all. What'd you call it? Woo woo.
Woo woo.
I don't want to get all. I don't want to get all
don't
woo woo
either.
but yeah, it's a very real experience when you come across. You just get a feeling, and you go off the trail, 100 feet, and you see something that just, I don't know, it pulls you in, and you end up like walking right into a set of grinding holes that were been there for centuries, and you go, what made me come right to that spot? Because it wasn't part of this trail, So I have a science background, and I am not supposed to believe in the woo woo, but I have I have the experience also of that there are things that can't be explained, and that we you need to bow our head once in a while and respect them.
It's kind of a spiritual thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Instead of woo-woo, it's more that I think you'd be, when you're out on a trail all by yourself, then it's just you and everything else that's around you, and I think your senses are more alive than if you are walking down the street and there's a whole bunch of people and kids playing ball somewhere. You can't really tune in as much. So it's just really finding your own senses. That's how I would feel about it. I mean, I sat naked on a rock in Africa, so I know.
Oh, here we go. Not that story again. People are going to send emails again. But yeah, Jim, the book, there's a part of it you talk about, when you think about going step by step, and especially I remember, the calls with you, the radio calls with you when you were walking across the country, you were loosely following the American Discovery Trail. And by the way, Nancy and I are finding all kinds of rails to trails trails here in Tulare County in the Sequoias.
It's cool.
They have a rails to trail program here, and they're connecting towns. It's all called over the Santa Fe Trail. That was the old Santa Fe Railroad, which I think is really cool. So it's connecting parks, and they're expanding, and I'm like, yay. Found one in Maryland behind our bed and breakfast that we're staying in Easton, Maryland. We're like, check this out. This is cool. And I didn't know all about that until reading your book. So I'm like, this is cool. But when you start that, there's that thing about, okay, when you're doing an epic adventure, it's like, okay, let's put how many miles or how many parks have we been to. It's like we gave up even doing our park passport book. And I know people are going to get mad. But the reality is we're too busy doing. And there's something about having the experience and sharing that experience, but it feels like this continuous thing. And once you get past the checklist of what you're doing, then it becomes a rhythm and a cycle. And does that feel that way for you with the Pacific-Crest-Trail and just that whole, to me, that's what the book feels like. To me, it's like you're continuing through walking and then sharing the story, that you're continuing, you're keeping the history alive. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, what I try to do is sort of find a balance between the, kind of the serious stuff and my experience of walking and meeting people and all of that. It's if you look at the cover of the book, and I know the people who are listening right now don't have the book in front of them probably to see, but the cover of the book is the lower third of it is kind of it's a painting, like it was done by one of my former students who I need to mention her name, Sean Delgado, did the cover, and she's just a very talented person. And the bottom third of it shows a trail disappearing into the mountains. It starts out in the desert, disappears into the mountains. You can see like what appears to be Mount Rainier way up in the distance. But the dominant part of the cover is a face of a coyote, and what's so interesting to me about how she did this cover is that the left half of the coyote's face is in daylight. It's light, and the right face is dark, and and there's stars behind it. It's in the dark. It's like day and night, split in the middle. Okay. By that description, can you see that in your mind? I hope people can. But it's a very interesting drawing and very interesting painting that she did. We didn't really discuss that beforehand. I don't know how she came up with it, but it, the more I looked at it, the more studying I did, the term, the concept of coyote was part of a whole bunch of different traditions. Bunch of different tribal oral traditions had coyote in it, but one thing that sort of stood out with a lot of those stories was the duality of the coyote. Is like he or she is kind of a combination of playfulness and wisdom, and so you have my book kind of is that. It's my stories are to me, walking is a form of play. I just really enjoy walking, and I enjoy hiking and all of that. It's play to me at a very basic level, and then all of the things that but it's also kind of a form of meditation. After you're out there for 20 hours, you're in a zone. You're in a different state of mind, than you were when you started out that day.
Absolutely.
And all of those sacred places, those notions of the sort of the spiritual aspect of being that close to nature. That's the wisdom part, and the hiking and having fun is the playful part. I just think the cover kind of puts it all into a visual reminder that I really love. I really like it.
It's the trickster. We love coyotes. Yeah. By the way, I know you love cows. You love seeing cows on your walking adventures and your hiking adventures, and I want you to know that Nancy and I woke to the sound of cows going, yes, moo. It's a moo or a new.
No. Yeah, they don't moo. People think they say moo. No, they it's an N when they start out with an N.
Well, I just thought it was so funny.
I can't believe I just knowed on Big Blend Radio, but
it's the first.
You made me do it.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. But it's funny because I was like, I heard this. It was like maybe 5 a.m. I was up, but I was like, yep, Jim is coming on the show today. There's cows.
There's cows.
I have a thing with them too. I always find them. Nancy's always in with the squirrels. That's her thing. She's got a thing with the squirrels, and lately it's been prairie dogs. Well, not in California, but we've been hanging out with prairie dogs. But I am so excited to do a series and go by state, because really the stories are amazing. And just talking about these were trade routes, and we're finding that too as we cover some of these historic trails. Like El Camino de los Tejas, a National Historic Trail, goes from Mexico through like San Antonio, all the way to Natchitoches, Louisiana, and we've done portions of it. And there are pieces where they're finding like the Lobaneos. Oh, I'm going to have to get this name right. Lobaneos swales. They found like mounds and swales that were ancient pathways that were from thousands of years ago, from the ancient cultures. And this is out in East Texas that we found these. Like we're walking through, and it's like it's kind of the same thing as Natchez Trace, that parkway, which we haven't done yet. But they were saying like part of the trail is like where the buffalo were herded, so that you've got that dip in the pathway. And it's like the more that we can show people, like you're walking through ancient history, and think about these ecosystems and the nature. To me, we've learned from naturalists and park rangers and forest rangers that wildlife will stay in their zone. Like this is their area. Some depending on the species, like deer, their family, they'll keep reproducing and hanging out in that same 2-mile span. Think about like these ancient cultures, and that they were existing with the same family of animals. That's kind of how I look at it. It's kind of interesting. Your book makes me feel that way too. It's like, okay, yeah, they were there too. And of course, even with the fires, we went through the fire zone in Sequoia National Forest yesterday and this morning, and I'm like, what happened to the animals in these giant fires, But we saw squirrels and birds, and there were cattle. There's moo. Moo. They were there. The squirrels came back, and I'm like, how do they do that? So, how do they know to go home? It's interesting to me how that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all connected.
When you can't figure things out, you go to the mythology, and the mythology is like what people explained things before, some science sort of took over. And there's this one, I forget which tribe it was, but they had a story about their creator when created their people using the earth from their land, and so that they were actually made. So they teach their kids, we were made from the earth, this part of the world, that we're standing on. That's part of us, and so they, in their tradition, they don't leave that area. They might move around seasonally within the area, to depending on to get food and stuff. But they see themselves as completely rooted to that place. And when the settlers came along and displaced them and put them somewhere else, the settlers had no idea how that felt to them, how organically attached to their homeland they were, and that kind of, okay, it's a myth, it's a story, but it illustrates, sort of the differences of cultures, and I think it demands respect. I think it calls us to use our heads and question ourselves. That the whatever you want to call it, the dominant culture or whatever, has shown, just cast a blind eye to so many things that if you go those 9 pages in the back of the book and start reading some of that, you will get a different picture, and I hope people do. Yeah,
it's a good book.
I mean, it's not like I want people to, especially white people, to hate themselves or something like that.
No,
I just want people to understand that we're all connected. Every single person,
Mhm.
And I mean, look at all of the news stories, of just the last couple of weeks. If that doesn't convince you that there's a need for everyone to respect each other, then I don't know what will.
Nancy says the aliens, but I think the
Yeah.
aliens are among us, and they're pretty cool.
Okay.
But Jim, it's a perfectly balanced book because it's entertaining too. So you're learning, you're being entertained, you're also inspiring us to get outside, and that's important too as individuals, getting out there and being out in nature and being out in history, and and also understanding these places. So you're not just walking through and missing what you're walking through. So it's beautifully written. Before you go, who did you work with to edit it? Because it's well done.
When I thought I was finished, I asked Elaine Reyna if she would. She's an author too. She's working on a trilogy of books that she's got 2 of them done, and she's written another one with her husband Sonny. They have this amazing story going back, to the 1970s about all. They've traveled the world and given lectures in front of all these UN things and all this stuff. They're really just a treasure trove. Anyway, I asked Lainey if she would mind reading through it and giving me some pointers, and she loved it, and I just, that gave me so much confidence that a person of her experience and culture, that she kind of gave me a little confidence to go ahead and get it done. And she found the little punctuation things and that needed to be fixed too. So she's very smart.
Always good to have someone on your side with that. And everyone, again, the book is Walks Far Man, In Steps with History on the Pacific-Crest-Trail. It's by Jim-Ostdick, and that's Ostdick. You can find him on Amazon. Also follow his blog, palominodream.blogspot.com. He also has a Facebook group, Just Bike Racks. We love the Bike Rack Facebook group. I've got a bunch more to send you, and I've got a ton more gazebos for your gazebo too. So there's a gazebo blog because he documents gazebos around the world. It's awesome, but it's all about communities, and taking care of quality of life, and cycling is one of them. So keep up with that. Jim, we're going to close your segment. We've got another gentleman coming on in a second with music, but your song for the day is called Alpenglow. It's written Ozan, amazing musician. Go check him out at ozanmusic.com. But Alpenglow is from his album Alluvia. And I figured you'd like this song because I'm sure you've witnessed some alpenglow in your hiking adventures. So here it is. Thanks so much, Jim.
I have. I like it already. Good to talk to you.
Take care. We'll see you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.
Okay.